Now, the Metropolitan Police are under fire after an officer was filmed telling a Jewish man his presence was antagonising at a pro-Palestine march in London.
You are quite openly Jewish. This is a pro-Palestinian march. I'm not accusing you of anything, but I'm worried about the reaction to your presence.
Well, in the video shared by Campaign Against Anti-Semitism for Saturday's march, the Met officer then appears to threaten to arrest the man if he failed to remove himself.
You lot of people here now, you're being escorted out of this area so you can go about your business, go where you like freely, or if you choose to remain here, because you are causing a breach of these rules, other people,
if I remain here, you will arrest me.
Because your presence here is antagonising a large group of people, and we can't deal with all of them if they attack you or because your presence is antagonising them.
Well, the man says he was simply trying to cross the road after going to a synagogue. This comes following new polling suggesting only 4 of 10 people in England say that they trust the police, especially the Met, who got the lowest confidence score. So for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, will the police right to threaten arrest? Right, so joining me now is... I've got Gary Mond. I've got Gary Mond, Chairman of the National Jewish Assembly, Dr Rakib Hassan, Social Policy Analyst, and Jonathan Sacerdotal. Have I said it right?
Sacerdotal.
Sacerdotal, sorry. And a former detective at the Chief Superintendent of Metropolitan Police, Kevin Hurley. Sorry, Kevin, I've gone all crazy. Kevin, I'm going to start with you. Was he right to threaten arrest if you consider the situation that this gentleman was in?
Well, Mr. Gideon Falter, who's Chief Executive of the Campaign Against Anti-Semitism, had not just left a synagogue, because there are no synagogues in the area of Aldwych. He had deliberately gone to that area for reasons best known to himself, and we can only surmise what they are. If he'd wanted to cross the road on his own quite quickly, he probably would have got away. But what the officer was doing was quite rightly keeping the king's peace, preventing a breach of the peace, which would have meant probably that crowd, volatile, possibly emotional, may well have turned on Mr. Falter, quite improperly, because, of course, any person is entitled to cross the road and wear a Jewish kippah. But the fact of the matter is, it is likely that would have provoked a breach of the peace. The police officer very nicely and repeatedly asked Mr. Falter to move away. He chose not to because he intended to get this media feed and provoke the debate that he's got now. So yes, the Metropolitan Police Constable was quite right, and shame on the senior police leadership, and may I say the Home Secretary, who are all in the process now of falling over backwards to apologise.
OK, Gary Mond.
Yeah, how dare they apologise to a Jew, eh?
Oh. Well, I don't think that's quite what he meant. I don't think it's because they're Jewish. I think it's more to do with the fact that Kevin believes that the police acted correctly. But whilst you, Jonathan, carry on with what you were saying.
Well, it was a ridiculous response. I mean, it doesn't matter what Gideon Falter was doing out and about, and it doesn't matter how near a synagogue was. The man was walking on the street wearing a kippah, which identified him as a Jew. The policeman told him off for being openly Jewish. I hope you don't mind me being openly Jewish on this TV show. Hope it's not too antagonistic. I don't even care if he was hoping to get filmed. If he was hoping to get filmed in order to show how difficult it is for Jews to be able to walk around where those hate marches take place week after week for 7 months, then so be it, because that's what it's taken to get some arrests at these protests. Unfortunately, it's arrests of the wrong people. It's been arrests of people like Nihat Gorbani, the Iranian anti-Islamic Republic protester who's held up signs saying Hamas is a terrorist organisation, been arrested 3 or 4 times by the police for that. It's been the threatened arrest of this man now for wearing a kippah and going on the streets. I think it's absolutely preposterous to defend that kind of behaviour. It's time that the police actually started keeping the peace by arresting the people who threaten the peace. The people who threaten the peace aren't Jews or other people going around. Nana, if you went into a part of London where there were racists on the street and they said, you are openly black, you shouldn't go near them, they might beat you up, would you think that's the right thing to do, even if you'd gone there in order to film it and put it out on the media? Of course, no. You shouldn't be arrested for that or threatened for arrest for that, nor should Jews. And I'm disgusted that that other guest of yours has even tried to defend this, whatever he thinks of Gideon Falter.
Okay, Gary Mond.
The fact of it is that Gideon Falter and indeed any Jew must be free to go where they want as long as they're not breaking the law. But the added point I want to make is this is not the first example of this. We had just 2 months ago a case in Edinburgh where there was a march in February where a Jewish person wearing a Star of David was told almost exactly the same thing by the police officer then. And then there are going to be other cases that have happened where the individuals in question, the victims in question, have been lower profile and it hasn't got into the news. What has happened with Gideon Falter is simply the last of a whole series of examples of this disgraceful behaviour by the police.
OK. Let's go to Dr. Rakib Hassan.
Firstly, Nana, I'd make the point that I passionately believe in the cause of Palestinian statehood and the Palestinian people's right to self-determination. But I'm absolutely appalled by Gideon Falter's treatment, if truth be told. Britain is a land of considerable religious freedoms. He's openly Jewish, but he's ultimately a British man, and he absolutely has a right to walk wherever he likes in London. Now, if his presence is antagonising, problematic, or has a potential to cause public disruption, that's ultimately because the more unsavoury elements of the pro-Palestine demonstrations, where there has been very clear forms of anti-Semitic chanting and indeed the displaying of pro-terror paraphernalia, that hasn't been combated and it hasn't been treated with the robust law and order response that it deserves. So we have to be very clear here that we're ultimately talking about a British man. I take great pride in the fact that we live in a land of considerable religious freedoms. He has the right to be openly Jewish. And I also think that protesters, they have the legitimate right to protest in favour of Palestinian statehood, as long as that is within the boundaries of British law.
Well, but I think Kevin makes a good point, though, that it could be to protect him from the crowd, Kevin. I mean, that's... To me, looking at that, I don't know what my thoughts are on whether he was right to threaten with arrest.
Yeah.
But Kevin, he's trying to protect him, isn't he?
Then my first comments on this, if we really want to cut to the chase, is I believe in the right of Israel to retaliate against the Hamas attacks on them on October the 7th last year. But I also believe they should have been measured in their approach. So that's where I stand on that. Now, let me just deal with a couple of comments made there. The officer did not tell him off for being openly Jewish. He pointed out to him that perhaps a clumsy form of words, but he's in a pressurised situation. By being there with his kippah on, he was exposing himself to significant risk. There was a likelihood of the breach of the King's peace. And if we're all sitting there behind our screens at the moment saying the police should have facilitated his move across the road, do the people present think they should have done that if it would have ended up taking 50 or 100 men with shields and batons to deal with what comes next? Because that is the reality of let me finish. I didn't cut into anyone else. That is the reality of dealing with emotive crowds. The fact of the matter is, Gideon Falter that day went there to deliberately spark up the media. He has achieved his purpose.
OK, but his motive, Kevin, his motive should really be irrelevant because he should be able to do that. I think that's sort of the point, irrespective of his motives. So yes or no from each of you. Gary, was he right to threaten with arrest, yes or no?
Gideon was right to do
yes or no?
Yes.
Yes or no? Yes, he was. So, but was the police officer right to threaten with arrest? Yes or no? No. OK. Jonathan, yes or no?
I think it's a fairly obvious no from me.
Kevin Hurley, yes or no?
The officer acted correctly. He was trying to protect
yes or no, because we're running out of time.
Breach of the police. The officer did not threaten him with arrest. He said
yes, he did.
He could potentially be arrested.
Well, that's the same thing. I mean, look, I think that's the same thing. I think we're splitting hairs. And finally, yes or no, Dr. Rakib Hassan, yes or no?
Absolutely not.
OK, right. Well, listen, thank you so much for your thoughts. Apologies it couldn't be longer. But here's a statement from the Metropolitan Police. A spokesperson said, "We are aware of this video and fully acknowledge the worry it has caused, not only to those featured, but also anyone who watches it, and will review the circumstances. We have always said that we recognise the conflict between Israel and Hamas continues to be an issue of concern for many Londoners, and this includes the regular protests and marches in central London. Everyone has the right to travel throughout the capital city in safety."